one of the things you have to understand about Muslims here in the Cape region is that the history of the Muslims here in the Cape region, they were all learned people. They were from royal families. Some of them were nephews of kings in India. So when the Muslims did arrive here, one of the things that the Dutch people had no idea about was that these Muslims would go on and teach and educate people, educate the original people of South Africa, and these people would leave a mark and their legacy behind here. Assalamu alaikum and good morning from Cape Town here in South Africa. I'm currently standing in an area called Constantia, and this area, as you can see around me, is an absolutely breathtaking area. There's a lot of greenery here, and as you can see, beautiful views of the mountain here just behind me. And this is a kramat complex, and kramat basically means a tomb or a burial location, and this is basically the burial location of someone called Sayyid Mahmud, and he was one of the first people to come here to the Cape region as far back as the late 1600s under the Dutch colony as an enslaved person. Now these people that came here as enslaved people, they were Muslims and they were learned people, and they came from beautiful places in the Far East region. But when they came here, they were enslaved. However, there were loads of people here. There were the Khoi Khoi original people, and these people were slaves as well. And they worked in the farm areas here. And there's stories of one of the Malays, enslaved Malays that came here. There's stories of him actually teaching people how to perform wudu from a nearby stream. Now, one really interesting thing we'll show you now that we start off from this very point where Islam and Muslims first arrived here in Cape Town. There's a stream just down here. Now this stream here is believed to be a stream which Sheikh Abdul Rahman Matabe Shah actually demonstrated to the original, I believe, the Khoi Khoi people who lived here, the African people who lived here. He demonstrated to them, they used to work as slaves here in this field. He demonstrated to them how to perform wudu. Really interesting. There was only 4 Muslims here, yet they had that faith and they had that willingness and that want to teach other people and propagate Islam.
So back on the topic of the different shrines that's around the mountains. The shrines wasn't built as a place of worship. The shrines were actually built so that we can pay homage to those who brought Islam here from another part of the world. They strived to have Islam, practice Islam, even teach Islam under adversity. And Islam was then retained through their hard work. And that is what they recognized for. And the people go there to pay homage to them. That Allah has granted us the shuyukh or in those shrines who actually brought Islam here and kept it alive. Alhamdulillah.
So we're currently driving to our next stop on this Islamic history and heritage trail. But I just wanted to show you guys the views of the Atlantic Ocean and tell you a little bit about what this means in terms when it comes to the history of Islam here in South Africa. Now, a lot of the people that were enslaved from Malaysia, Indonesia, Sumatra, these places, they ended up at these shores right here in the Cape region, and they had absolutely no idea that they wouldn't be returning. They came here as enslaved people. Some of them were actually told that yes, you'll be returning to Indonesia, you'll be returning to Malaysia, but little did they know that this is going to be the last time they saw the shoreline. This is going to be the last time they saw their way home. So imagine traveling for over a year and coming to this region, thinking to yourself you're going to go back home, but this being the last time you ever step foot on the sand. So I've made it to Makassar, and Makassar is a very, very important location when it comes to the history of Islam here, a history of Muslims here in South Africa. This location is the setting for one of the most important figures that came here to South Africa. We're going to talk more about him as we enter Makassar. but I just wanted to show you guys the amazing view. If you zoom in, you can see the hills and the mountains overlooking the city or the town of Makassar, as you can see just over there. We finally made it to the shrine and the tomb of Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari, who was the founding father of Islam here in the Cape region of South Africa. Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari played a huge role when it comes to the history and heritage of Islam here in South Africa. He was in fact known as the founding father of Islam here. He came here as a 68-year-old man, and this was in 1694, and he was a learned man. He was a well-known, reputable scholar, and in fact he was a royal because he was the nephew of someone called King Baisai or Bisay from Goa. Now, first Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari was actually exiled to Sri Lanka because there was fear that he was influenced too many people to go against and retaliate against the colonization of the Dutch in the Far East. Now, when he was exiled to Sri Lanka, he got a lot of people, well, quite a few people actually vouched for him to go back to Indonesia. So the Dutch thought, let's send him somewhere so far that no one really knows about this place. So they sent him to the Cape region. Little did they know that many hundreds of years later, this would become one of the most visited places in the entire world. In fact, some people actually describe it as the best place in the world. So Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari came here. He was exiled here as a prisoner in the year 1694. And remember, he was a 68-year-old man at that time. And in those situations, to be exiled as a prisoner, to have chains around your wrists, to become enslaved, and to go through and endure such harsh conditions, it's not easy. It's not easy even as a young adult. Even in the prime of your adulthood, 40, it's not easy. So he came here, and it was in this area here, it was in this town of Makassar, that Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari came with 49 other followers as an exiled prisoner, and he taught many of them all about Islam, and even the non-Muslims would come here and learn about Islam. And they found it a place of refuge, really, to learn about Islam here. He lived for another 5 years, from 1694 to 1699. Little did Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari know, when he reached the coast, the shores of the Cape region of South Africa, little did he know that he's going to be here for 5 years and that he would not be returning home. So it's really interesting to come here and to remember his story, because he was one of the most important figures when it comes to the history and heritage of Islam here in South Africa. So now we're going to move on, and we're going to explore another part and another person who is also equally important in the history of Islam here and heritage here in South Africa, especially in the Cape region.
People from all over Malaysia, Indonesia was brought here as shuyukh, but brought here as slaves. And these were shuyukh who knew the deen and practiced the deen very strongly. And if you look at the people that came, where they were buried at strategic points all along the perimeter of the mountains, you will see that the shrines are there today. I know that shrines shouldn't be actually built up, but there's a reason for us building it up here in the Cape. It is those who were the people who brought Islam here, taught it here, and Islam is still being practiced here because of those people. And that's the only reason why I see those shrines are then built and preserved for the purpose of recognition and pioneers of Islam, from those who's then going to follow, to pay homage to those who brought Islam to them.
We have now made it to an area called Bo-Kaap, and this area here is extremely important when it comes to the Islamic history and heritage here in the Cape region of South Africa. Now, there are only two main areas where Islam developed, and these two areas became a means of Islam spreading around all of South Africa. Makassar, which we just visited, and also this area called Bo-Kaap. This area is still home to the descendants of the many Cape Malay Muslim slaves that lived here during the late 18th century. So this place was inhabited by Cape Malay Muslim slaves in the late, you could say, 18th century, around the late 1700s, the early 1800s. So it's about 200 years, because over 200 years Muslims have been living here. So the main reason why I've come here is to show you this amazing structure right behind. This here is the Awwal Masjid. Now, the Awwal Masjid is basically the first masjid that was established here in all of South Africa in 1794. A man named Tuan Guru, whose real name was Imam Abdullah Qadi Abdus Salam. He came here in the year 1780. He was exiled here. He was actually a prince from Tidore in Indonesia. He was exiled here and he was in prison for around 13 years in a prison on Robben Island, the same place where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned. And so this building here is the first masjid that was established in South Africa. And so when he came out of prison, it was 1793, he first established a madrasa, and then he established this mosque here in 1794. And he actually, whilst he was in prison, he wrote the entire Quran off by heart. And that was one of the first Qurans that was written here in South Africa. And that's on display here inside the masjid, which I'll show you right now. So if you do come to Cape Town, this is actually one of the main places that you should come to, because it's actually, there's an imam here, his name's Sheikh Ismail Lont, and he's really helpful. There's actually the entire neighborhood, the Muslims that you'll meet here, they'll tell you a lot more about the history and the heritage here, some of the stories, the houses, about the colors and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting place, and this is, you could say, one of the first Muslim communities here in all of South Africa. And like I said, the descendants of the many Muslims that lived here during that time are still living here. The descendants are still living here. Some of them are moved out, but majority of them are still living here. So the first masjid that was established in all of South Africa is right here. The Awal Masjid that was established in 1794 by a man named Tuan Guru. So I think this is a good place to end the video. I'm currently at the Tanah Baru Cemetery, as you can see just over there. And the reason why I've come here is because this is the resting place for Tuan Guru himself, who we just mentioned a little while ago. Now, Tuan Guru spent a lot of his life enduring many hardships. And you know, to think to yourself, right, that speaking to some of the locals, this is something that came to my mind, to think to yourself that a prince who came from an exotic, a nice island to a place here, which is nice as well, but to come to a place that's completely foreign to you, yet to still carry on propagating Islam, to write the entire Quran off by heart, to establish the first masjid, that tells you a lot about a person. And it was because of the hardships that many of the Muslims endured at the beginning when they first came here. The Cape Malay Muslims could have easily said, I'm going to sit back and not do anything. But because of the hard work that Tuan Guru put in, and his community, and the way he practiced Islam, they actually had underground zikr sessions. So they preserved religion extremely well. And so it was because of their efforts that Islam was able to spread throughout the rest of South Africa. Anyways, Jazakallah khair for watching, guys. I hope you guys have learned something new today. Please be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you guys in another video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu from Cape Town here in South Africa.